My daughter-in-law, Chloe, smirked as my son, Daniel, shuffled into the courtroom. But when the judge, a woman with sharp eyes and a stern face, saw me follow him in, her pen clattered onto the bench. She stared, her composure cracking as she whispered, "Eleanor Vance? Is that really you?" The air grew thick with silence. Chloe and her smug parents exchanged frantic, panicked looks. "I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I want to know how far my story of reckoning has traveled." The murmurs in the courtroom died the moment Judge Isabella Rossi took her seat. Her gaze, known for its intensity, swept across the room. When it landed on Daniel, my son, I saw a flicker of pity. But then her eyes shifted to me, and they widened in pure, unadulterated shock. It was as if she'd seen a legend step out of the history books. I walked steadily to the defense table, the click of my heels the only sound. I placed my worn leather satchel on the polished wood. A soft thud that echoed like a challenge. I sat beside Daniel, covering his trembling hand with my own. The silence was deafening. Judge Rossi leaned forward, her voice a disbelieving breath. "Eleanor Vance? Why are you here?" That question was a shockwave. Chloe's smirk vanished, replaced by a deep frown. Her parents, the Harpers, leaned together, their whispers laced with sudden anxiety. Daniel looked up at me, his eyes clouded with confusion, but beneath it, a fragile, desperate hope. Seeing him like that, my heart shattered. He had no idea. No one in that room knew that I wasn't just a retired, quiet mother. I had been the Vindicator, the lawyer who never lost until I chose to walk away. Just an hour before, the city was draped in a cold, drizzling fog. I helped Daniel from the car, his body leaning heavily on the crutch, each step a painful reminder of the man he used to be. The crowd outside the courthouse buzzed with morbid curiosity. "That's the Shaw case," a reporter muttered. "The wife is taking him for everything." My grip tightened on my satchel. It didn't just contain legal papers. It held my son's future, his dignity. A sleek black sedan pulled up. Chloe emerged, dressed in a blindingly white designer coat, the color of false purity. She adjusted her oversized sunglasses, a smirk playing on her lips. Her parents followed, their chins held high, radiating an aura of inevitable victory. The sight turned my stomach. They had no idea about the sleepless nights, the years of struggle Daniel and I had endured to build our life. Inside the courtroom, the air was heavy with the scent of lemon polish and ambition. Chloe was already seated, one leg crossed over the other, a silver stiletto tapping a rhythm of impatience. When Daniel struggled to his chair, she let out a derisive snort, loud enough for our row to hear. "Can't even walk straight," she whispered to her mother. I felt a fire ignite in my veins, but I remained still. Daniel lowered his head, his knuckles white as he gripped his crutch. Chloe's lawyer, a slick young man named Mark Reynolds, stood and announced to the court, "We will prove that Daniel Shaw is emotionally and financially incapable, a shell of the man my client married. We seek a dissolution of the marriage and a fair division of all assets, including the family business, Shaw Innovations." Each word was a lie, a poison-tipped arrow aimed at my son's spirit. The family business, the tech startup Daniel had built from our garage, coding late into the night while I worked double shifts to keep the lights on. The sterile air of the courtroom faded, pulling me back to a different time. Our small apartment was always filled with the smell of soldering irons and ambition. Daniel, at 16, his eyes bright with ideas, would explain his latest project to me. "Mom, this could change everything," he'd say, his hands flying over circuit boards. I'd smile, my heart swelling with pride, ignoring my own exhaustion from cleaning offices all night. His father, Robert, had left us when Daniel was 12. He came home one Tuesday, his face a mask of cold indifference. "Eleanor, I've found someone else. She understands my ambitions." He walked out with a single suitcase, into a waiting convertible. I stood in the kitchen, a dish rag in my hand, feeling the world crumble. Daniel stood in the doorway, his small frame rigid, watching his hero disappear without a backward glance. That night, I found him curled on his bed, silent tears soaking his pillow. "Mom, why wasn't I enough?" he whispered. I gathered him in my arms, my own tears held back by sheer will. "You are everything, my boy. We are enough for each other." I made him that promise and I built my life around it. The years that followed were a grind. Days at a data entry firm, nights doing bookkeeping for local businesses. There were weeks we lived on rice and beans, but Daniel never missed school. The day he got a full scholarship to MIT for computer science, I cried in the grocery store, holding the letter, the happiest I'd ever been. Shaw Innovations was born in that same apartment. I mortgaged everything, even my grandmother's tiny pearl earrings, to buy his first serious server. He worked tirelessly, and his app, a revolutionary data security program, took off. The day he bought us the modern glass and steel house, he handed me the keys. "Mom, we did it. No one can ever take this from us." When he married Chloe, a vibrant marketing executive, I thought our happiness was complete. She spoke of building a legacy together. But the car accident changed everything. A drunk driver, a shattered spine for Daniel, and a shattered marriage from Chloe. The vibrant, driven man became a shadow. Chloe's patience evaporated. I once heard her on the phone, her voice sharp. "He's a ghost, Mark. I can't waste my life on a ghost. Just get me the company and the house. That's all that's left of value." She started coming home late, smelling of expensive cigars and foreign perfume. Her wardrobe transformed from practical blazers to silks and jewels. The neighbors talked. I saw her once through the window of a downtown bistro, laughing with a man I recognized from the business section, a venture capitalist known for hostile takeovers. The final blow came when I overheard her coaching our 8-year-old grandson Liam in his room. "Liam, sweetie, you have to tell the judge you're scared of Daddy, that you want to live with Mommy in a new safe house." Liam's small voice trembled. "But I'm not scared of Daddy. I love him. Don't be difficult, Liam. Do you want us to be poor? Do you want to live in your grandmother's tiny old house?" I stood frozen outside his door, my heart breaking for my grandson. That was the moment I knew I couldn't just be grandma anymore. I went to see an old contact, a private investigator named Frankie the Badger Lowe. His office was a time capsule of coffee stains and filing cabinets. "Eleanor the Vindicator Vance," he whistled. "The law's loss was, well, I guess it's my gain today." I laid out the situation. "I need everything, Frankie, especially on her and Arthur Brandt." Arthur Brandt was the venture capitalist. A week later, Frankie met me with a fat envelope. Photos of Chloe and Arthur at a secluded airport, on a yacht, documents showing secret transfers of company intellectual property to a shell company owned by Brandt. It wasn't just a divorce, it was a corporate raid. Back in the courtroom, after my entrance had stunned the room, I began my defense. "Your Honor," I started, my voice clear and steady. "The petitioner claims my son is incapable." I present his most recent medical evaluation, stating that while physically disabled, he is of sound mind and is undergoing successful therapy. I placed the document before the clerk. Mark Reynolds objected, but Judge Rossi overruled him, her eyes fixed on me. I continued. "Regarding Shaw Innovations, I present articles of incorporation and financial records proving it was founded and is solely owned by Daniel Shaw, established 5 years before his marriage. It is, and always has been, his separate property." Chloe's face was as white as her coat. Her father gripped the bench in front of him. Then I played the recording. Liam's small, frightened voice filled the room. "But I'm not scared of Daddy. I love him." Then Chloe's icy reply. "Don't be difficult, Liam. Do you want us to be poor?" The courtroom erupted. Chloe shot to her feet. "She manipulated that. She turned my son against me." Judge Rossi slammed her gavel. "I will have order. I wish to hear from the child." Liam was brought in. He looked small and scared, but when the judge asked him where he wanted to live, He looked at his father, then at me, and said in a clear, brave voice, "With my dad and my grandma. I don't want to lie anymore." Daniel broke down, sobbing with relief. Chloe, desperate, screamed, "Your Honor, she's a fraud." Eleanor Vance was disgraced. She lost the Sterling case because she was incompetent. The room went quiet again. All eyes were on me. I stood, my posture straight, my gaze unwavering. "I did not lose the Sterling case," I said, my voice ringing with a clarity that silenced the last whisper. "I uncovered that the presiding judge was on the payroll of the opposition. When I threatened to expose the entire corrupt network, I was threatened. My son, who was a teenager at the time, was followed. I chose to walk away from the law to keep him safe. That judge was later disbarred and imprisoned. I left not in disgrace, but to protect what mattered most." I looked at Daniel. "My family." Judge Rossi nodded slowly, a look of deep respect in her eyes. "I remember the Sterling case. The whispers were true. The legal community owes you a debt, Mrs. Vance." The verdict was swift. The divorce was granted. Daniel retained full ownership of Shaw Innovations and our home. Custody of Liam was granted to Daniel, with my shared guardianship. Chloe was granted supervised visitation only. The look of utter defeat on her and her family's faces was not a victory for me, but a necessity for our survival. We heard later that Arthur Brandt dropped Chloe immediately, his interest vanishing with the lost prospect of the company. She moved to another state, a ghost of her former arrogant self. Now our home is filled with light again. Daniel, with renewed purpose, is developing adaptive tech for people with disabilities. Liam sleeps soundly, his nightmares gone. I watch them from the kitchen window, Daniel explaining a new line of code to his fascinated son. The battles of the past are over. I am no longer the Vindicator of the courtroom. I am something better. A grandmother, a mother, the guardian of a peace we fought for with truth and an unbreakable love. And that is the only victory that ever truly mattered. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever felt backed into a corner and found the strength to fight back, share your own story in the comments below. Let this be a place of support and strength. And for 2 more tales of quiet resilience and stunning comebacks, stay right here. The next videos are waiting for you. The peace we forged felt like a fragile, precious thing in those first few months. Every ring of the doorbell made my heart jump. Every legal-looking envelope sent a jolt of fear through Daniel. But as the seasons turned, so did our confidence. The fear slowly melted, replaced by the steady rhythm of a life rebuilt. Daniel's physical therapy became a family ritual. Liam, ever the eager assistant, would solemnly hand his father the resistance bands, his small face a mask of concentration. "You can do it, Dad," he'd whisper, a mirror of the encouragement I'd given Daniel his whole life. I watched muscles long dormant twitch back to life. But more importantly, I watched the light return to my son's eyes. The defeat that had hunched his shoulders began to straighten, replaced by a quiet, grinding determination. His company, Shaw Innovations, became his sanctuary. He converted the sun-drenched living room into a makeshift office, his wheelchair rolling smoothly across the polished concrete floor. The accident had given him a new perspective. He wasn't just coding for profit anymore. He was coding for purpose. He started designing a voice-activated smart home system specifically for people with limited mobility. It was his way of reclaiming his narrative, of turning his own struggle into a tool for others. Liam was his chief tester. "Okay, Dad, make the blinds go down," he'd command, and Daniel would speak the code word. A grin spreading across both their faces as the motorized blinds whirred shut. Our house became a laboratory of hope, filled with the whirring of prototypes and the sound of their shared laughter. It was the music I had ached for during those silent, tense meals with Chloe. One afternoon I was in the garden, my hands buried in the rich soil, tending to my tomatoes, when a shadow fell over me. I looked up to see Arthur Brandt standing at our wrought iron gate. He looked out of place in his impeccably tailored suit, a stark contrast to the blooming hydrangeas. "Eleanor," he said, his voice carefully neutral. I stood slowly, wiping my hands on my apron. Mr. Brandt, this is a surprise. I made no move to open the gate. I'm not here for trouble, he said, holding up his hands. I came to apologize. And to make an offer. My guard stayed up. An offer. Daniel's new project. The adaptive tech. I've heard whispers. It's impressive. He paused, choosing his words. My involvement with Chloe was a miscalculation. A severe error in judgment. I saw a vulnerable company and a driven, if morally flexible, woman. I was wrong. I said nothing, letting the silence press down on him. I want to invest, he finally said. Properly. Through legitimate channels. No strings, no hostile takeovers. I have the capital and the distribution network to get his technology into thousands of homes. He deserves that. After everything. I studied his face. The arrogance I'd seen in the photos was gone, replaced by a weary respect. He wasn't here for Chloe. He was here for the deal. But for the first time it was a deal that recognized Daniel's worth, not his vulnerability. I'll relay your interest to my son, Mr. Brandt, I said, my tone leaving no room for negotiation. The decision is his and his alone. He nodded, handed me a crisp business card, and left without another word. That evening, over a dinner of pasta and homemade sauce, I told Daniel. He listened quietly, his fork still. Liam watched him, sensing the shift in the air. He wants to invest? Daniel finally asked, his voice low. He does. He claims he sees the value in your work. Daniel was silent for a long moment, staring out at the twilight. He tried to destroy me, Mom. He used Chloe to do it. I know, I said softly. But he's not offering a partnership out of guilt. He's offering it because you've built something he can't ignore. Something stronger than his schemes. A slow, steely smile touched Daniel's lips. It was a new smile, one I hadn't seen before. The smile of a CEO, not a victim. Then we'll hear his proposal. On my terms. In my lawyer's office. And Mom. He looked at me, his eyes clear and certain. You're coming with me. I'm not facing that shark without my Vindicator. A week later, we sat across a polished mahogany table from Arthur Brandt and his team of lawyers. Daniel in his chair was the calmest person in the room. I sat beside him, my old leather satchel at my feet. I didn't need to open it. My presence was the statement. Daniel laid out his terms. He would retain 51% controlling interest. The branding would remain Shaw Innovations. The core mission, affordable, life-changing adaptive technology, would not be compromised for profit. He spoke with a quiet authority that brooked no argument. He was no longer the broken man from the courtroom. He was a visionary reclaiming his power. Arthur Brandt, to his credit, listened, and he agreed. The contract was signed, not as a surrender, but as a strategic alliance. As we left the office, Daniel let out a long, shaky breath. We did it, Mom. On our terms. The influx of capital was a tidal wave of positive change. Daniel hired a small team of brilliant, passionate engineers. The prototype became a product. The product became a success. Magazine features followed, not about the tragic accident, but about the tech pioneer revolutionizing independent living. One such article, complete with a photo of Daniel and Liam in our living room turned lab, was how Chloe found us again. It was a rainy Tuesday. A courier delivered a single, thick envelope. No return address. Inside was a handwritten letter from Chloe. Daniel, I see you've moved on. Thrived even. I'm glad for Liam. I am. My life hasn't gone as planned. Arthur discarded me. My parents are disappointed. I'm living in a small town, working a job that barely pays the rent. I was arrogant and cruel, and I lost everything because of it. I don't expect forgiveness. But I am asking for a chance to see my son. Not in some sterile supervised room. A real chance. A day at the park. An ice cream. I miss him. I am still his mother. Chloe. Daniel read the letter. his face a storm of conflicting emotions. He handed it to me. What do I do, Mom? After everything she did. After what she tried to make Liam do. This was a battle I couldn't fight for him. This was a wound only he could decide how to suture. This isn't about what she deserves, Daniel. It's about what's best for Liam. He's old enough to have an opinion. He deserves to be heard. We sat Liam down that night. Daniel explained in simple terms that his mom had written a letter and wanted to see him. Liam was quiet, fiddling with the edge of his placemat. Is she still mean? He asked, his voice small. We don't think so, buddy, Daniel said gently. She says she's sorry. Would you like to see her? I asked. Just for a little while, in the park where we can all be there? Liam thought about it, his brow furrowed in a perfect imitation of his father's thinking face. Okay, he said finally. But only if you and Dad are there. The meeting was arranged. We saw her before she saw us, a lone figure on a park bench, huddled in a simple coat, a far cry from the woman in the white designer dress. She looked ordinary, defeated. When Liam approached, flanked by Daniel and me, she stood up, her hands trembling. Liam, she breathed, her voice thick. Hi, Mom, he said, hesitant but not fearful. We stayed at a nearby bench, giving them space but remaining a safe, visible presence. We watched as she talked to him, watched as she cried, watched as Liam, with the profound grace of children, eventually offered her a half-eaten cookie from his pocket. It wasn't a happy ending. It was messy and complicated, laced with the scars of the past. But it was a beginning. A supervised, cautious, and deeply human beginning. On the walk home, Liam slipped his hand into mine. She was sad, Grandma, he said. I know, sweetheart. Are we still a family? He asked, looking between Daniel and me. Daniel stopped his wheelchair and pulled Liam into a one-armed hug. We will always be a family, Liam. You, me, and Grandma. That will never ever change. Whatever else happens, this is your home. As we continued our walk, the city lights began to twinkle in the damp evening air. The war was over. The battles were won. Now we were navigating the delicate, ongoing work of peace. And as I looked at my son and my grandson, I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that we had the strength for that too. Our foundation was no longer just brick and mortar. It was forged in truth, tested by fire, and built on a love that had proven itself unbreakable. The park meeting became a cautious, monthly ritual. Chloe would arrive always exactly on time, her posture less defiant, her smiles hesitant. She brought small, thoughtful gifts for Liam. A book about constellations, a fossil she'd found on a hike. She was genuinely trying, to rebuild a connection from the ashes of her own making. Daniel and I watched from our bench, a silent, united front. We were his anchors. She was a ship trying to find its way back to a port it had willingly abandoned. The success of Shaw Innovations continued to swell. Daniel was now a recognized name in the tech world, not as a victim but as an innovator. He was invited to speak at conferences. The first time he wheeled onto a stage, his voice amplified for 1,000 people. I sat in the front row, my heart pounding with a pride so fierce it brought tears to my eyes. He spoke not of his accident but of his vision. A world where technology served human dignity. He was no longer my broken boy. He was a leader. One evening after a long day of meetings, Daniel rolled into the living room where I was reading to Liam. He had a strange, pensive look on his face. Mom, he began, his voice careful. The board is pushing for a permanent, proper headquarters. We've outgrown the living room. That's wonderful, Daniel, I said, marking my page in the book. He nodded slowly. It is. But it means leaving this house. The air went still. The house. The one he had built for us, the one we had fought a war to keep. It was more than a structure. It was a symbol of every promise kept, every battle won. Liam looked up, his eyes wide. Leave? But this is our home. I know, buddy, Daniel said, his gaze meeting mine over Liam's head. But it's also Filled with a lot of ghosts, isn't it? He was right. In the quiet moments, I could still sometimes hear the echo of Chloe's sharp heels on the floor, the memory of her contemptuous sneer. The master bedroom had remained largely unused since she left, a museum of a failed marriage. The house was a fortress, but its walls also held the whispers of our deepest pain. Where would we go? I asked, my voice soft. Daniel's face broke into a tentative smile. I've been looking at properties. There's one. It's on a single level. Wide doorways. A garden Liam can run in. It's designed for the way we live now, not the way we used to. He pulled out his tablet and showed me the listing. It was a modern, sprawling ranch-style home, all light and open space, with ramps seamlessly integrated into the design and a kitchen I could only dream of. It was a home built for a future, not defending a past. A week later we toured it. Liam raced through the hallways, his laughter echoing in the empty rooms. This one can be my room. And this can be Dad's lab. Daniel wheeled himself from room to room, a look of profound relief on his face. He wouldn't have to navigate narrow doorways or worry about the single step down into the sunroom. This house offered him freedom. Standing in the vast, open-plan living area, watching the sunlight stream onto the bamboo floors, I felt the final knot of tension in my chest loosen. Daniel was right. Our old house had been a shield. This could be a home. The decision was made. We would sell the fortress and build a new headquarters for Shaw Innovations, and a new home for our family. The move was a catharsis. Packing up the old house was like exhaling a breath we'd been holding for years. We donated Chloe's old things. We turned the master bedroom into a storage space for boxes, stripping it of its power. The day the moving truck pulled away from the curb, I stood for a moment on the porch, my hand on the familiar wood. "Thank you for keeping us safe," I whispered. Then I turned and got into the car without looking back. Our new life in the ranch house was like a rebirth. Liam blossomed, having a vast yard to explore. Daniel's work flourished in his custom-built, accessible home office. And I found a new purpose. With the daily battle over, I started a small, non-profit advisory service from my sunny new kitchen, offering pro bono legal counsel to families facing predatory corporate practices or unjust civil suits. I wasn't the vindicator of the courtroom, but the guardian of the kitchen table, using my knowledge to protect others as I had protected my own. One afternoon, about a year after we'd moved, the doorbell rang. It was Chloe. She stood on the porch holding a small plant. She looked healthier, her eyes clearer. "Eleanor," she said, "I heard you moved. I wanted to see it. And to give you this. It's a peace lily. For your new home." I was struck by the symbolism. The gesture was simple, unassuming. I stepped aside. "Come in." She walked in, her eyes taking in the open space, the ease with which Daniel moved from the kitchen to the living room. She saw Liam's artwork proudly displayed on the refrigerator. She saw a family whole and happy without her. "It's beautiful," she said, her voice thick with a genuine emotion I hadn't heard in years. "It really is." Daniel wheeled into the room. There was a moment of tense silence. "Chloe," he said, his tone neutral. "Daniel, you look good." She swallowed. "I'm glad. Truly." She stayed for a cup of tea. The conversation was stilted, careful, revolving around Liam's school and the unremarkable weather. But there was no venom in it. When she left, she hugged Liam tightly, and he hugged her back. After she was gone, Daniel wheeled over to the large picture window, watching her car disappear down the street. "You okay?" I asked him. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I am. It's strange. I don't hate her anymore. I just feel sorry for her. She's on the outside, looking in at the life she threw away." That was the final quiet victory. Not revenge, not schadenfreude, but peace. The anger was gone, leaving behind only the quiet, steady beat of our lives. That night, as I tucked Liam into bed in his new room, he looked up at me, his eyes sleepy. "Grandma," he murmured, "I like our new house. Me too, sweetheart. It doesn't have any sad corners, he said, and then rolled over, falling asleep. He was right. Our new home had been built on a foundation of truth and hard-won peace. There were no ghosts here, only the bright, untarnished promise of tomorrow. The story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about resilience. It was about a family that had been bent, shattered, and then piece by careful piece, put back together stronger and more beautiful in the broken places. And as I turned out his light, I knew with a profound and quiet joy that our story was finally completely our own.